Good morning. You know what today is? Monday Morning Chats with Sack. Sack is me. I hope that you guys had a great weekend. I hope that your Monday morning is off to a great start. This past week was good for me. I got a chance to support my students. They had a law review symposium discussing two cases, the Vega case and the Dobbs case. And so I didn't get a chance to listen to the panelists for the Vega case. That's a criminal law case. So I did get a chance to sit in and hear the panelists talk about the Dobbs case. That's the abortion case, the Supreme Court case that was overturned. And so just hearing the panelists, meeting them, it's mind blowing to just see how the Supreme Court, once they make a ruling on something, how it impacts everyone. And so we had a great discussion about that. I got a chance to go to the Black Hair Experience in Maryland, actually in Prince George's County. It's a small museum. It's pretty much a Southie museum where it has pretty much all different type of props related to Black women and their hair. So from hair products to like the hot comb, the chemicals that we put in our hair. I mean, it's just amazing. Magazines. It was just great. And so they had a ladies game night and we had so much fun and my team won. And the gift was like a pin that you put in your hair and a brush. And I'm like, I have no hair, so I can't. This is not the brush that's meant for me. This is a brush for someone that has hair, but I don't really have any hair. So yeah, so that's the gift that I got. But I wanted to talk about a few things, and I decided to do this video early because I have therapy at 8 a.m. and then I have a client meeting right after therapy. So my morning is pretty booked. But I thought about a few things, and this past week I had Bible study, and we talked about meditation, like what's the purpose of meditation. And I didn't facilitate, my co-facilitator did, and she found scriptures that related to meditation. And meditation allows you to be still, right? It allows you to be still, and it's in the Bible to be still for some type of intention, right? There's some type of intention, like if you're doing yoga, you're doing some type of meditation, it's really allowing you to just be still. And the scriptures that, I don't have the scriptures in front of me, but the scriptures that she referenced just talked about, can you just be still for God? Can you listen to him? Can you give him some time, right? Can you spend time with him? And it just made me think, like, what happens when you spend time with God? Things can really happen for you, right? And then we start to touch on, like, the things that we want in our life, whatever it may be. And I forgot what someone else said, but they talked about this idea of imposter syndrome, right? Just thinking like you're not just good enough. And what I told them is, I said, well, where is your faith, right? Where is your faith if you feel like you're not good enough? Because if you spend time with God and you talk to God and you hear him, your faith will increase, right? If you're still and you listen to him, your faith will increase. And so when someone was talking about how, overcoming different things in life and how they just wasn't sure if they were good enough for something, I said, well, who told you that you wasn't good enough? And did you talk to God about it? Maybe you felt like you wasn't good enough because maybe you wasn't walking in your purpose, because that happens to all of us. There's a lot of people that are going to work and they hate their job, right? They hate their job. They're there for a paycheck, but they hate it. But when you're walking in your purpose, it doesn't feel like work at all. So I was like, where is your faith, girl? Where is your faith? And while the young lady was speaking, I was like, I'm going through my Bible. I was like, wait a minute. God gave me a word for you, sis. So I'm like just going through the Bible. I was like, wait. Here's one. And I gave her a scripture. I was like, hey, why don't you meditate on this scripture and maybe it will help you. And then, I want to say these last 2 months or so, been hanging out, being intentional about hanging around people that I want to make sure I cultivate these relationships. So being intentional who I hang out with. And the relationships have been very soothing. It's been healing, and it has been helpful. When we just talk about life, there's no need to gossip. Like, if you're that type of person, I won't make time for this conversation. That's not the conversation I want to be a part of. But just healing and soothing. And I even had these conversations with my mother. And if I had to title this, it will be, You Live What You Learn. And my mom said that to me. I was like, wait, I'm driving in the car, and I'm driving. We had this conversation. I sent her this heartfelt message. What I try to do prior to going to class, I try to listen to some type of sermon, or I read the scripture to just really get me hyped to go teach, right? No, I'm not teaching Bible study, but I'm teaching law students, but I try to have that in me prior to teaching. And God kept telling me, this was this past Thursday, I need you to look at the sermon. Like, T.D. Jakes, he gets me together, right? He gets me together. And there was a sermon about, actually, it wasn't a sermon. It was an interview with Sarah Jakes Roberts and her father, T.D. Jakes. And they talked about how she grew up as a child with two parents in the household. I think it's called daddy issues. How she grew up in a house with two parents, and how she really looked up to her father. And she married a man that's like her father. And that was a good thing, right? That was a good thing. She married someone that was like her father. And when she had conversations with her dad, what her dad was sharing with her was that, hey, I became a father. I was your father at age like 34, 35. So I didn't know much. I didn't know a lot. But the man that I am now, 35 years later, I've learned so much. And I will always hear parents say, there's no manual for being a parent, right? No one teaches you how to become a parent. You learn that stuff on your own, or you learn what you've been taught. And so when my mom said, you live what you learn, it just really started to make me think. And what prompted me to reach out to my mother and had this heartfelt message was that when T.D. Jakes said, hey, I was 30-something when I had you, I didn't know as much as I know now, 30-something years moving forward, it made me think about my own mother. My mother had me when she was 23 years old. And I compared my life to hers at that time. And I said, wow, at 23, I didn't have any real responsibilities. I just had to get up and go to class. I was in law school. I didn't have nothing to really wear. I was broke. I was on food stamps. I didn't have much to really care about. Like, I didn't have to take care of another human being. And so it just really put me in the perspective like, wow, I could have had a child at 23, right? My mom had me at 23. And it just made me think about all the things that she learned at that time or what she knew at the time. And the one thing that I've learned, especially when it came to like really healing and forgiveness from my previous therapist 2 years ago, is that your parents were once kids at one point in their life. And sometimes the things that they struggle with as a kid, sometimes they may not even get over it. But when you become a parent, it's this idea that you have to like suppress those feelings and care for your child. But what I have found is that when they suppress those childhood traumas as a parent, it shows up in their parenting, whether they want to believe it or not. And it makes me think about when I hear people say, hey, I don't want this. Like, let's say someone says, hey, I don't want to be married. I don't want to have children, or I hate men, or, or I hear some women say, men ain't this, men ain't that. Or I hear men say, women ain't this, women ain't that, or this is not what I want. It makes me think about how they were raised, right? Yes, your own experiences can help shape your perception of life. But sometimes when you really dig deep, it's not just about what you experience as an adult. sometimes it's about what you experienced as a child. In my opinion, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist, but just based on articles that I have read, my own life experience, talking to other people and their own experiences, it just makes me think, like, what have you experienced that has you so jaded from not wanting the things that you once thought you wanted, but you don't want them anymore? I'll hear people say, well, I never experienced what a healthy love can look like, or I never witnessed people together and actually staying together. And why that can be a narrative and why that can be true, the question is, yes, you have experienced that and that's what you have learned. But the question is, can you change a narrative? And I believe that you can. You can really change a narrative about the things that you were taught as a child, whether it's directly or indirectly. But the question is, are you willing to do it? Like, are you willing to do this? And I shared this in Bible study, I want to say, like when I first started to facilitate. I shared this in Bible study that, and I even talked to my mom about this. Like, me and my mother, my father, we've been having really deep conversations. And those conversations really sparked when they lived with me during the pandemic, right? And so when you are forced to stay inside, sometimes those conversations come about. And I remember in the beginning of the pandemic, just me and my dad, we just had conversations about just all type of stuff. And I remember telling my father one day, I said, any mistake that I have ever made when it came to choosing the wrong guy, I said, I would never blame you. That was my mistake as a woman. You had dominion and control over me as a child, but as an adult, I make my own decisions. And I told my dad that. I told him this to his face, and he respected that, because I would hear women say, well, because I didn't have a father in my household, these are the reasons why I'm making these decisions. And I'm learning based on what my father has taught me. But I learned to change the narrative and say, irrespective of the good decisions and the bad decisions, Dad, you are not responsible for that. I am. I'm responsible for that. So I want you to think about the things you learned throughout your life. And are you living that way? Did someone tell you that you're not worthy of love? And you're actually living that way. That is a narrative that you're placing on yourself, saying that, hey, I'm not worthy, right? I'm not worthy. I remember when I was a kid, and I remember this one girl, she would call me ugly all the time. Like, she would call me ugly. That was a word that she named me. And if I lived in that, I wouldn't think high of myself. I wouldn't think that I was beautiful because of the term that she called me. I was called names throughout my early childhood. From me not having straight teeth, and me just thinking that I'm just not worthy. But if I lived in that narrative, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I also shared in therapy. And I also shared in Bible study that, and I shared this with my parents. I was like, although you did the best that you could when you had me, and you had my brothers, you did the best that you could based on what you have experienced. My experience will be different because I learned from you. I've learned what I should do, but I also learned what I shouldn't do. And the reason why I know what I shouldn't do, because I surrounded myself around people that I looked up to. So when I went to college, one of my first mentors that I gravitated to, her name was Miss Lucas, and she was over our scholarship program. She was a Black woman. She was educated. And I said, wow, I can be that, right? Even though I didn't see women in my family go to college, I said, it's possible because I see her. And I would see other Black women, other Black professors, like, wow, I can get a college education. I can graduate from college because I was able to see it. Even though I didn't see that in my family, I've learned from other people. for God putting other people in my life, right? So if you live what you learn, my mom wasn't the person to bring me to Christ. It was my aunt. And I've learned the importance of having a relationship with God. And even though my aunt brought me to Christ, I had to eventually experience that journey alone when she stopped going to church. And then I will pray to God, like, I'll be in middle school, like, God, I really want to go back to church. I just don't know what church to go to. I don't know who to go with. I never been by myself. And when I got to college, I started to crave from even more. And I remember right before I went to college, I said, God, I want to go back to church again. Unbeknownst to me, my roommate, who is now my best friend, family heavily into church. And when I prayed that prayer, the first week that we were in our dormitory, I was like, yeah, I'm doing my hair. This is when I had longer hair, right? Because short hair, I have no hair now. And I said, yeah, I want to go to church again. And she was like, oh, well, my family goes to Lum Kingdom in South Philly. I was like, oh, when do you go? Because I was going home, like, I had a boyfriend at the time, so I was going home like every other weekend. I should have never went home. Let's just say that. But the times that I did go home, I went to church. And I got to the point where I realized, like, man, I like this, right? I really like this. And I remember one point in I want to say, in high school, I was like, I'm not sure if I want to be married. Because in my mind, I will think, based on what I have learned, what I've experienced, that starting with my parents, that I didn't see something healthy. And I was like, if that's what I want, but if I can't get it, and I said because I couldn't get it because what I experienced, that I didn't want it. But when I moved to Michigan, it was life-changing. I rededicated my life to Christ when I went there. It was October the 2nd, 2011, when I rededicated my life to Christ. And the only person there that was able to witness that was my sorority sister / roommate at the time. Only person that was able to stand. But that church, I went to Pilgrim Rest in Lansing, Michigan, on the west side of Lansing. And I remember, even in my church in college, I remember seeing so many marriages, like so many people married. And I was like, wow, they make this so attractive. I was like, hey, I like this. Like, I was able to see them work together. And I was like, oh, man, I like this. I was able to see the relationship with my pastor in Philly. And I was like, oh, man, I like this. And then when I moved to Michigan, the way my pastor treated his first lady, his wife, it made it attractive. And I was like, oh, God, I want that. Then when I got to law school, the first person in my family that went to law school, and I didn't know what that would look like, right? Because if you live what you learn, the big accomplishment was graduating from high school. I already did that. I did that. Get a good job. Wanted to go back to school, right? So me living in Michigan and going to law school, I didn't have anybody that I could talk to about what it's like to be a lawyer, because I was going to be the first one. And so with me and my family, I was the first to graduate from college, the first to get a law degree. So I created a blueprint because the blueprint wasn't created for me. And I remember like saying to myself, I met one lawyer prior to me going to law school. It was my uncle's friend. She was a public defender, but I had nobody in my family that I could talk to. And so when I went to law school, my first class, and I think God does things for a reason, my first class was contracts. It was January 3rd, 2010. It was cold outside. It was snowing. And my first professor was a Black woman. And I was like, and she went to Yale and she was super smart. And I was just in awe by her. Every time I go to class, like, wow. She called on me so many times. That was my first C in law school. But that was one of my classes that really, really inspired me to know that I'm possible, to know that I can go to law school and I can graduate and I can be a lawyer just by having that one example. So although you live what you learn, you can change the narrative and realize like, hey, maybe some of the stuff I did learn was not so much good, but I can actually change it because I deserve the life that I prayed for. I deserve that. And so I had this shirt that says Black professors matter. And now I'm that example at my law school. I meet students that are first generation college grads. I meet students that's first generation law school grads. And I'm able to relate to them. And when they come in my office, little do they know in my mind, I'm saying, I see you. You can become what you dreamed of. You can become what you prayed for. One of my students came up to me last year and said, Professor, I want you to know you're my first Black professor. And that almost made me cry. Because I was so used to saying I had a first Black woman professor. Now someone's able to say that to me. And it pushes me, right? It pushes me to just like not be good, but to be great, right? Because as a Black woman law professor, I matter. And there's someone that's in my class saying that I want to be like you. And little do they know, I'm trying to be better. But you live what you learn. And so the question is, just because you experience things that may not be fair, it may not be fair. And I'm sorry if you experience a life that you did not want to experience. But I'm here to tell you that you can create the life that you want. If you really trust in God, you can create it. Me and my brother talk about this all the time. I didn't know what it was like to be vulnerable. Did not. I didn't know what it's like to be soft. And I told one of my girlfriends, I said, we went to law school together. I said, you gave me a blueprint of what softness in a woman looks like. And you were only 25, and what you failed to realize is that you encouraged me, right? You encouraged me. And at the time that I was dating somebody in law school that I fell in love with, and I was able to show that. And it felt weird because I was like, this is not me. So I'm trying to shake it off. And I realized, like, why shake it off and why not try something different? And then I realized that it was changes happening because my friends started to see it. They was like, Sakina, you in love. And I denied it. I was like, no, girl, no, I'm not. No. Because in my mind, anytime I hear people say, I'm in love, it always came with some type of hurt that followed. And I said, if love is supposed to hurt, I don't want that, right? And that's based on what my experiences, what life has taught me. But once I became an adult, once I started reading my scriptures and really paying attention to God and being still and listening, and the one thing I've learned is that the people that you do love, the people that you love, they will hurt you. They will hurt you. Sometimes they don't mean it. Sometimes they do. But it's a risk that you take. And for so many years in my early 20s, I was afraid to take that risk, right? I was afraid. I used to always tell myself, and like this is like when I first moved to Maryland, that, hey, I'm not ready for something serious because I have to finish my externship. Then I have to pass the bar. I have to study for the bar. Then I have to pass it. And then I'm trying to go back to school, so I'm not going to really have time. And now that I look back over it, it wasn't that I didn't have time. It was out of fear. So could I study for the bar and have a partner? Absolutely. Could I pursue a master's degree and still have a partner? Absolutely. But it was out of fear. And so I would tell myself that if I focus on getting this degree because it feels good and I know what the outcome would be, I could focus on that. But in my mind, if I focus on love, I was scared of what the outcome could be. And I always used to think maybe that the outcome can be something like getting my heart broke. But then I realized that was a risk that I take. But you can't experience love if you don't take the risk. And when I started to look back over my life, like that I could have had this. Like, I walked away from some relationships. Like, they were like, if this is not what you want, they were telling me, you're not going to waste my time. I'm like, damn, okay. All right. But then I realized that I didn't know what a supportive partner looked like. So I ran from the idea that someone could be supportive of me based on this idea that you live what you learn. That someone could have been supportive. But because I didn't know based on life experiences, I pushed it away. And when I started going to church more and praying more and being around men that I respected, because I don't respect a lot of men, but being around men that I respected, those that were married and that value their wife, I was able to see what support looked like. And so now I can have a job. No matter what job I get, no matter what business I run, a partner will always be needed. And there's always room for one. But I had to change my mindset. And I had to be around people that I admire and who I look up to that can give me an example, even though I didn't have one. And so I say all that to say that you can really create the life that you want. Yes, you live what you learn. And sometimes we live through these harsh experiences that we experience as children, because that's where most of our problems come from. But I'm here to tell you that you could have a bad childhood. You can't go back and change the past. But what you can do is you can create the future that you always wanted. And so that is my prayer to you. For you to create the future that you always prayed for and wanted, because you can really have it. Like, you can really have it. And so that's all I have, because I got therapy in like 3 minutes. I will say that, one, this goes out to men. God made me look at He Emotions again by T.D. Jakes. And it was just heartfelt, right? Just understanding the emotions of a man. And I just want to give you all like a church hug, right? Like hugs. And I just really pray that, people give you the space to just be you. And then when I started thinking about men and how they react and the way He Emotions is described, that some men never knew what it was like to be a man because they didn't have a man in their household. So I pray for you if you're that guy. If you don't know what a man is supposed to look like, and maybe you're criticized as an adult because you are really trying, often the example that doesn't even exist. So you had to figure this thing out. And so I pray for you, and I do pray that you find men, good men that you admire, that you could look up to, even though that presence wasn't in your household, right? Because we try to become someone that we want, but sometimes we fall short if we don't have an example, and it all starts in our household. So I pray on you today. I give you extra love today, and I just pray that you become the man that you always wanted to be. But I will tell you that you may need men around you that you admire that can uplift you and help you get there, because we are better together. We are better in partnership. And I just want to say to all the Black men that's listening to this, I just want you to know that I love you. And I just hope that you know that you are amazing, and just know that I see you trying. I really see you trying. And that's all, because therapy starts in 1 minute. So be safe. Be kind to yourself, but most importantly, be gentle. And I love you, Black man. Have a great Monday. For everybody else, have a great Monday. And most importantly, just have a great, fantastic week. Bye.